trolley cars, beautiful cars, but not like the Interurbans. And those were used mostly for the local service. So they had local service, and then they had the more limited service to go. Average speed for the non-local service was, during stretches where they could open the throttle up, was about 60 miles an hour. But during that time, if they were running late or something like that, they were clocked at up to 78 miles an hour. So they could go. So just to give you, so the day that Roosevelt rode on the Narcissus, the newspaper clocked what time he left the car house on Middle Street, and it was 20 minutes past 4. So then you have to go through, Court Street. You got to go, get off, change, call in the dispatcher, get back on the car. They made a stop in Gloucester, Upper Gloucester. Then they made a stop in Gray. Then they made an unanticipated stop in West Falmouth shortly. Then they had to get to Deering, get off, call the dispatcher, then get on the 4 or 5 miles of track on Forest Ave into Monument Square. So 35 miles. Then he gets off because there's a huge crowd there. He gets in the car, he goes to his hotel, and he arrives at the hotel at 10 past 5.
Wow.
He was not doing 60 miles an hour. Oh, well, I'll get to that. So when the PLI went out of business in 1933, 5-year anniversary, they put together a reunion for all the former employees. And it was done in Gray. And for 4 years, they were able to put that together. And they would bring in, they would encourage people to bring in photographs, newspaper clippings, all that stuff. And Charles Heseltine, who was a railway historian, by himself, helped a lot of different historical societies with electric railways in the Maine Historical Society. And so he put together this scrapbook. And before his death, he gave the scrapbook to O.R. Cummings, who was our historian and published more than 50 books on electric railways in New England. And it was in our library. O.R. sadly passed away, but I was first introduced to it maybe in 2015 or 16. And we just had it totally conserved, so $18,000 to have it. This 88 pages with over 200 photographs, plus all the newspaper clippings. This is a copy of what was in it was Gertrude Libby. She had the first ticket to go on a public ride on the Arbutus in 1914, and this was her ticket, and that was in that book. But it was missing. But we had a picture of it. But she must have taken it back. So maybe Paul has it. But this is Northeast Document Conservation Center down in Andover, Mass. They're terrific. This is the inside of the car house on Middle Street. Anybody ever been in there before it was a doctor's office? When it was, this is. So in here, you can see that you had those 2 doors. There's the office where they sold tickets. And it happens to have a car that is a Laconia-built car, Interurban, and a car that is a Wasson company-built trolley. So number 10, 12, 14, and 16 were built in Laconia, New Hampshire. But number 18 and 20 and 22, the main, were built in Wasson, Springfield, Mass. Now there are some differences. They're majestic and all this stuff, but so this car is a Laconia car. You look at the leaded stained glass window and you'll see more details later. It's a little different design. You look at the trucks, and the truck is a set of wheels, motors, and axles. So these cars are big, 47 feet long. So they're double trucks. So there's a complete set in the front and a complete set in the back with, in this case, each truck had 2 90 horsepower motors, the wheels, the axles, brakes, all that stuff. And you can see just that one little difference. This is the Wasson car. This is the Laconia car. But I'll show you a few others. So this is a W.S. Libby great-great-great-granddaughter, and she and her family live in San Diego, and they came to visit one day. And if you've been to the Trolley Museum, into the restoration shop, as a visitor, you can go up a set of stairs and you're up on the second floor looking down at cars being restored or that have work being done on them. Occasionally there might be a volunteer or a staff member working on a particular car. You can ask questions. So the Narcissus is right there front and center. So a volunteer is working on the car and overhears a daughter talking to her father, and the father says, yes, that's, and the grandmother has a nickname that I don't recall what the nickname is, but you know, we all might have a nickname, but I'm just going to say yes, that's your grandmother's grandmother's grandfather's trolley car. So the volunteer overhears that, looks up and goes, you connected with the Libby somehow, the Narcissus? He says, well, my mother-in-law is a Libby. Her father is W.S. Libby III. And he said, you know, do you mind, you know, having contact information? We've been trying to track down Libby's for a few years now. You know, we had connections with them back in the 60s, but we lost those connections. And so, so Sophie here is 9 or 10 years old at the time. Her father came over to my place, and so I had some pictures of them holding up these leaded stained glass windows from the Narcissus because they were just being restored in 2015. That was one of the first things we started doing when we brought the car back in. And so you can see there's many different sizes, and you see how the stained glass is like a flower with blossoms around it. So this is the Laconia stained glass. This here is a Wasson stained glass. See how that's different? So sometimes, you know, now you can look at it and say, oh, that's a this, that's a that, because sometimes you can't see the number, which will tell you the name, or you can't see the name because they would, in gold leaf, have the names and numbers on the cars. So another way you can tell is the interior. So this is the interior of a Laconia built car, like the Narcissus. This is the interior of a Wasson built car. So you can see the seats. See the handle on the Laconia seats? There's a brass handle, so you pick it up because the seats will rotate. So you can change directions, which way you're sitting, depending on what direction the car is going in. So with these, you just flip them, so it's different. So there's these nuances that, you know, us in the field, you know, certainly learn about them. So this is a picture of the Narcissus, and all the lettering was all in gold leaf. And so this is an advertisement, and it used to be that there'd be a brass wheel that would be the conductor for the wire overhead that had the 600 volts of electricity connecting to that brass wheel to a wire at the end of the pole, and that would go into the car and then feed, you know, the controller and go and ground out through the wheels. And so this company, Miller Trolley Company, came up with a design that's called a shoe, and there's a replacement carbon piece in there. It conducts, but it's much easier, lasts much longer than the brass wheel. So they happened to use the Narcissus, this is Monument Square, to promote and advertise the change. So this is in the early 20s. Well, that's when they started doing it, but that must be late 1918 or so, but went into the 20s. And ultimately, virtually everything went to the shoes. Whoops, going back. Get touchy with the finger there. So that was that one, all right. So the most famous passenger on the Narcissus is Theodore Roosevelt. So in 1912, he lost as a progressive candidate. But in 1914, he was still promoting the Progressive Party, the Bull Moose Party. And so there were candidates in Maine. So he came to Maine to promote those candidates as well as the national ticket numbers. So